All right. So today my talk will be about reviving an abandoned project. It's an open source discussion. So the main idea here is that I want to take an abandoned project that I started 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, and I didn't go far, but I think the idea is nice. And it should be released to the public so that people, if they make more use of it or if they have good ideas, they can actually pitch in. But it's all about the process, right? It's just an excuse. I needed to have some code that was not released yet, maybe, and that has problems. And I want to discuss, if you want to go in and outsource something, open source part of your code, what are the things that you need to care about to make it happen? And so, basically, want to convince you that open source is important. It's very impactful. There's a lot of code that we do, of work that we do that relies on open source, and we sometimes don't even know it, right? So I'll just talk briefly about the example project that I've got to release. As I said, it's really just an excuse, and whoops. Sorry, I won't touch the mic. I know that it's been calibrated. And we're going to go into some checklists, common mistakes, even things that I do a lot of open source projects. And when I started this project, I didn't even think about it. And I made a lot of mistakes. We're going to go through them. And then maybe discuss about, having final thoughts about what is the future of open source for LabVIEW and piece of software that is based on LabVIEW, or maybe even those of you that do test stand or other NI products. So my name is Francois Normandin. I work at Rivian and Volkswagen Group in California. This is basically a technology company that delivers test software and hardware for Volkswagen and Rivian brands. And in my team, we do test automation for low voltage electronics. So a lot of LabVIEW. We use Python, we use React, we use data lakes. So there's the whole stack that you can expect for a system that basically generates a lot of data, but needs to be analyzed and available readily. So I've been using LabVIEW since 1999. I'm a LabVIEW champion, LabVIEW architect, and I've got a bunch of projects online. So I don't want to call myself an expert on open source, but definitely an enthusiast. So why open source? We talk about it at NI Connect this year. We take this opportunity because NI open sourced 2 projects. You've heard about it on the keynote. They discussed it last year when they said that they wanted to do something into the lines of open sourcing. So Actor Framework and Icon Editor might have heard about it. I wanted to highlight the tool vipm.io. When I say tool, it's really the website where the community gathers to deliver our packages, our reuse packages. So that's owned by JKI. And the vipm.io is really the place where community can, for free, publish our packages and make them available to the world. It's easy to search and really a central resource. I've highlighted a few individual contributors, collectives, companies that are, that we might recognize their logos as we go through. So some of them, like, I don't know how much you use open source in your work, but I'm thinking of JSON text. This is something that for me, I use everywhere. So if it's the equivalent of the import JSON in Python for those of you that would be more text-based developers, right? So open source impact. I wanted to maybe start by asking the crowd here. How have you been impacted by open source? Have you been impacted by open source? Do you know about open source? So let's maybe start. So have you used open source in your work? Just show of hand, maybe. Okay. For those of you that don't, you probably use things that you don't realize are open source, maybe in other languages, right? Anytime that we open a browser, we don't know, but we use an open standard that is probably relying on some cybersecurity stuff like OpenSSH or TLS and all these algorithms. They're really public open standards. So it's not technically open source yet until you get to the tool and the code itself. But we do encounter that a lot. So do you work for a company that actually encourages open source contributions? And by that I mean, like, are you allowed to even contribute? So I see some yes, some no, right? So this is something that is very difficult. Companies have legal departments, obviously, and they care deeply about, IP. That's the bread and butter of companies these days. And so, yeah, open source contributions, it can be hard to just jump into. It needs to be a commitment. So maybe there are some of you that companies completely prohibit. That might be government lab, right? Because maybe it's something about military or, that's going to happen. I've worked as a consultant before for customers that would prohibit us from even reusing OpenG because it was not a product from NI. So we were hired to code in LabVIEW, and we could not use an open source library. So we had to spend time to just reinvent the wheel all the time, right? And so that's an impact that your company can face if you don't allow using open source. Maybe some have a small company that rely on that. So I don't see anybody here. Anybody has a consulting company? No? All right. Yeah, you have one. Can you testify whether your business would be impacted if you didn't have access to open source?
Well, yeah, I guess we would be impacted, but just on your last comment about prohibits, I remember my time with working for the Air Force, and it was hard to we got around it, but it was initially hard to justify, like using the OpenG or the MGI toolkit. And the way that we got around it is, MGI was subcontracted to us. And so then we could say, well, the MGI toolkit is technically code that they wrote, and so they own it, but we can use it. And therefore, the OpenG toolkit, we kind of umbrella brought it in as, MGI sponsors it, kind of, and we could bring it in. But I know that a lot of government staff and military are trying to use more open source, but it's still kind of a barrier that they're working on overcoming.
Thanks. That's a very good point. And to that, like wrapping open source, in a way, if the open source code is well opened, it's really open. Like, anybody can fork a project and make it their own, right? Of course, there's attribution based on the license, and we can talk about that later a little bit. But definitely, that's something that is a possible avenue to explore for you. So I'm gonna skip a little bit quickly, right? Who has contributed as individuals? I think a few here have done that in the past. I certainly did. So, all right. Definitely increased productivity because of that. Like I said, I don't like reinventing the wheel. If it exists out there and it's free, I should reuse it. That's what the internet is based on. It's built on. So I want to talk very briefly, like, what is the real impact in our lives? If we were to erase all the code that is open source today, it would cost at least $4 billion for a corporation to recreate it from scratch. So the cool thing is that we have all the requirements. We know that our products would stop working, and how much of an investment would it be? So it doesn't seem much, $4 billion, right? That's manageable. A big company like Google could do that, right? But then on the demand side, what is really the value here is everybody that relies on those technologies and don't even realize it. If you analyze every piece of technology that we use, every piece of code that we use, it's $8.8 trillion. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody this is the real cost, right? It's really how much value is dependent on the availability of of open source software. So most of that comes from everything that runs behind your browser, obviously, or even like languages like Java or, All right, I'll skip very quickly on that, but this is my own open source project in LabVIEW. So LabVIEW open source project, it's really a single developer thing, but I've got like 40 something repositories right now that are public. I think that's going to be 43 because I'm opening one today, right now in this presentation. So there's no ad hoc, it's ad hoc organization. There's no hoops to jump into. You just go in, you copy the code if you want it and you don't want to contribute, or you use it, or you just do a pull request and you do it. I was talking briefly about open source licenses, so you need to check it out. I've got another slide on that, but I use ZeroBSD, which is, I think, the just barely above public domain. And the reason is that public domain is not something that is recognized universally. So I chose actually ZeroBSD. So ZeroBSD means no attribution. You want to use it, you copy it. It's your right to do it. Don't sue me if there's a problem. That's about it. All right, so today I'm going to go quickly on that because the goal is not to be technical, but I still wanted to have a little bit of technical in my presentation. So Bananas, this is the name of the open source project that that I had started. Actually, it was a private project that I open sourced today. So the address is there if you want to look it out, if it's something that interests you. What is it? Is it a LabVIEW-based system for sorting of ripening stages of bananas? No, it's not. It's actually an extension to a unit test framework. That would have been really fun. When I stumbled on that article, I thought it was a cool use of LabVIEW, really. Really research-oriented. All right, so Karaya, anybody here has heard of Karaya before? So I've got a few show of hands. So Karaya, for those that don't know, is a unit test framework. There are a few in LabVIEW. This one is a framework that I've contributed to since, I think, 2016-ish. It's a very lightweight assertion-based model, and it's completely open source. So even though I left the company that owns the license to Karaya, I still contribute to that. I think it's a really fun project. And so one of the complaints that I've received from people that were using Karaya over the year is that, oh yeah, I'd like to add this feature, this feature, this feature. And so making it extensible, right, is always something that people look after. How can you reuse that in your company? Right? That's the goal of open source software. There's a piece of software there and I have a need and that fits like, oh, great, that fits 100% of my need. I don't need to change anything. I'm going to use it. Great, awesome. But what if it covers just 90% of your needs? What if you still need to have that 5, 10, 20% extra work that you need to do to customize it to make it useful for your business and basically generate dollar revenues, right? So the extension is what I'm after here. And one of the things that is kind of technical debt with Karaya is that there is a strong coupling between the UI and the engine, the unit test engine. So how do you decouple that, right? So if you create an abstraction, you're going to basically be able to do that behind the scene without people being impacted. Because if you use an adapter on that library, then any change to the library, if the interface remains the same and it still passes the unit test, which is great because this is a unit test framework, right? So there's an extensive series of unit tests that are built in Karaya that actually demonstrate that Karaya runs correctly, right? And so what is an assertion? It's just a way to say, is this actually true? So you say, I have a measurement and I have bands and I want to assert that it's within the bands, right? So it will assert true if it's within the bands. It will assert false if it doesn't. It throw an error. You can say, is my temperature within these limits? You could say, is my function returning actually, when I say lowercase on this string input, I want to make sure that the output is going to be lowercase. How do I validate that? So I make assertions, right? This is so lightweight that you can actually put it in production, but that's usually not what we use it for. It's really more for unit testing, including integrating in your CI/CD pipelines for when you build your own projects. All right. So my goal here was decoupling, allowing extension, but I don't know what other people want to extend it for, right? I know what are my needs today. I don't know what are my needs tomorrow, and I certainly don't know what the others' needs are. And so I've decided to create. You see at the bottom of that diagram there, Karaya and the use of its interactive UI that is a bit strongly coupled. And I was trying to build on top of it so that, and I don't know if my mouse is going to show. No, probably not. I would need a pointer. But what you see, like banana and platano, we can come back on the names later. That's a bit part of the problem here that I wanted to discuss. But that line is really a wrapper. Platano Karaya is a wrapper on Karaya. Make sure that you can reuse Karaya as a drop-in replacement. So you see on the right of the diagram. In Karaya, it would look exactly the same, except the nodes would be purple, red. And here it's really just a drop-in replacement wrapper. So you don't even need to change your code. Just replace them with the new nodes, and then you're safe. You're safe for the future. Whatever upgrade arrives, it's good. Now, also, I want to give possibility for people to say, you know what? I don't use Karaya. I use my own unit test framework. So I'd like to create a plugin for it. So what really makes a difference, I think, in open source projects is when you break the code and create interfaces that people can extend. If you give them a full project, that's great, but there are so many pieces under the hood that I might like to change. Like, why would I be forced to use JSON as my test result? Maybe I want to use XML. How do you allow someone to come up with the next plugin when in 5 years' time, it's neither JSON or XML that is popular, right? At some point in time, it's going to change, so plan for change. Right? So I'll skip a bit on the details here. But a bunch of different patterns, adapter, strategy, and decorator pattern for those that are interested. All right, keeping track here of time. Sorry for the noise. The first one, adapter pattern, is basically to create a wrapper. So you see the node that is red on the right side. This is really just the basic Karaya node that is assert true. Is this statement true, yes or no? And if there's a no, obviously it throws an error. Otherwise, there's no error and the flow continues. Now, what this wrapper does is that it brings a layer that will go and inject strategies that you're going to be able to configure ahead of time. And those strategies can be the default strategies that will come with Banana Framework, or the strategies that you decide to implement for your business. We're going to have a good example in a couple slides, actually. Basically, this model is reused everywhere. So assert true, assert that there's an error, assert that I'm within band, assert that this value is within limits, right? All of these will use exactly the same template. All right. One thing that I forgot to mention, like this is not executing the test engine of Banana. Banana is not a test engine at all. There's no core. It's really just a wrapper. So whatever you call, it's going to still execute exactly Karaya's core engine, right? Okay, some example strategies. What are strategies? When I execute a test suite, I want to pre-fill with metadata, right? Maybe you run the test suite in a validation lab. Maybe you run it on your personal computer. Maybe it's in production. You might reuse this framework if you want it in production. I want the serial number. I want the operator name, right? Is it running my version 2 of my executable or my version 1, right? Anytime you might want to define a strategy that is, okay, set up the environment metadata. When a test case fails, I want to inject a rationale. Okay, great. I know that it failed. Like I'm not within band, but what is it? Is it band, A, B, C, D, whatever channel if you're in the RF system, right? You might want to give some hint to the user, to the person that looks at the test results. When I run a test case, I want to add the test requirements because obviously we start from the test requirement database. Maybe it's something in Excel, maybe it's in JAMA, maybe it's something else, right? Your own database. Inject those into your test case. When it finishes, I want to upload the result to my MES. So this is not part of the core engine. Like Karaya is a unit test framework. It's not something that interfaces with your manufacturing execution system or anything like this. So you could develop a strategy for that. That framework makes it, one class that you write, and you just tie into your facility. When a test report is produced, I want to calculate test coverage. Did I cover all these requirements, or I left some of them, right? So you need all these hooks somehow to be generic. Okay, I want to develop a new strategy in band waveform. Like, that's not an assertion that exists because maybe you don't care about Wi-Fi, right? But maybe I've got a Wi-Fi 6 and I've got a Wi-Fi 5 in band. So these tests might be different. The type of metadata that they produce might be different. So you can characterize that, and you could even match it on the serial number that you've put in the metadata. Everything ties into the object model. All right, I'm gonna go. What else do you want to do next year, right? I have thought about that. I don't know what the future holds for us. So obviously, when I'm developing that framework, I want basically to be able to prepare for the future. New strategy. I showed a very simple one before that was assert true. This one is, okay, assert almost equal. Maybe you have your own algorithm that you want to develop, right? So we're going to put that into the assert true, and basically it's, again, a wrapper, and it just ties into our site framework. That was all the technical code that I really had. If you have questions, we can go into the example codes, but I think I'd like to switch back to open source and what are the mistakes that you need to avoid. Now, this is a project. It was abandoned, basically. So that means that, there must have been some problems with it. I didn't go through. Maybe it was too complex. Maybe it wasn't, other problems. So naming convention and theming, this is something that maybe you have noticed, but banana, platano, peels, leaves, pips, I've got a bunch of things like, what do they mean? You're a user of an open source library. What do they mean? You will be rebuked by that, right? So it needs to be fixed. Cannot stay there. Choosing your license wisely. I touch base a little bit on that, making sure that we select something that is actually, going to allow people to reuse it. Otherwise, you're putting roadblocks. So version support, project organization, and so on. So we're going to go into each of those. Theming. If you're putting something out there, try to maintain consistency across your palette. So some of you might recognize, right, who is the contributor, the first there. Someone knows about that person? Base64, JSON, cryptography, and JWT. Q, I think you know. Yeah, so that's Derek Bomerito. By the way, he was supposed to be in this room presenting today. So cute.
he publishes under Illuminati G,
exactly.
Which is why the pyramid. Oh.
So I'm going to repeat that because you're not on the mic, Q, but he publishes everything under Illuminate G with the pyramid. So all his contributions have that pyramid. I recognize Derek's code right away. So if I trust Derek's code and I see that pyramid, unless someone spoofed him, I'm going to trust his code because I know he's a high quality contributor, right? So maintain consistency across your projects. Project extension, you see Karaya? Well, Karaya is done by JKI, right? But then there are a couple of extensions. People have extended Karaya to do a command line interface. That was me, by the way. But the other one is JUnit extension for the test reports. And so I don't know who that is, but that person uses the same color palette. Now I recognize that it's associated with Karaya. That's great because when I browse VIPM.io and I see that new library that popped up in my feed, hey, maybe that's something that interests me, right? So let's bring consistency. You see at the bottom, I've put some of NI's palette. Sorry, NI. But the three on the right, they're fine. You don't need, there are thousands of repositories and palettes for NI. You cannot have the same consistency. It's impossible. But the one on the left, though, this needs to change. Don't use the default icon that comes with VIPM. When you build your package, change the icon. Your palettes, they need to be clean and functional, easy to navigate. Don't put everything. Don't just say create palette and leave it at that. Remove everything that is private and protected. We don't want to see it in the palette. This is not for us, right? This is for you, the developer of the project. And then don't mix your branding and functionality. I think you can see where I'm going with that banana and platano and things like that. So by the way, banana was something that I actually asked AI in the early days when it started. I said, okay, I've got this unit test framework called Karaya. Karaya is actually a howling monkey that howls very loudly when there's danger. And so that's why it's the icon for the unit test framework. If there's a problem with your code, I want to know like right now, right? And so I just pitched in the ideas, and banana was the only one that made any sense for monkey. So I guess I went there. But you see, like, if it were a private project, maybe I don't care. I've seen like Bart Simpson's icons in the past. I've seen like front panels being blue because the company was blue. Like if you want to release an open source project, clean it up, right? So this is not something that I've had time in the last 2 weeks to do. So I'm going to release it as is, but it's definitely something that needs to happen so that it's consumable. But now it's going to be open source. So anybody that wants to get ahead of the curve can start playing with it. So I've reused that banana type of theme everywhere. That doesn't help you. Like on get platano varietal, like really, it's just to get the configuration name, right? So go straight at what the action is for the verb and what is the noun that describe that action. So go to the function. Same things, leaves are properties, pips are results. Yeah, sure. So be mindful of not to mix your company's marketing, maybe if it were about marketing, with your actual product. Project organization, I think this one is really important, and that's not just for open source projects. I see that as more like when I organize my libraries in my projects, I try to always put them first in classes and libraries. If you don't use classes, put them in libraries, right? Libraries allow you to leverage PPLs and have faster compile time. That's something that is really useful, but also it gives you namespacing. Namespacing is important because we all have these, you see on the bottom left here, this is create, start, stop, and destroy. How many people here use create, destroy, start, and stop, right? If you leave that outside of the library, it will collide, obviously. So namespace it. Using VIMs is actually something, no, I've got another one later. I'm going to talk about malleable right there, actually. So if you use malleable VIs and you want to release something in public, you should not put it in the same library as all the rest of your code. Problem is that malleable VIs cannot be public in a PPL. Why? Because it's actually, PPL is compiled code, and malleable, well, you don't know to what instance you're going to compile. It's going to adapt its type. So because there are thousands, well, hundreds, I'll say, of types, like I cannot pre-compile for all of them. So if you do need them and they are public, not protected or not private, actually, cannot be protected, you will need, in my opinion, to put them in a separate library. Now, it's perfectly fine for one library to call the other library. The cool thing with that is that the day that I want to use just the malleables in my code, I can still create a PPL of the main library. And that way, all the malleables are the only things that will actually compile in my code, right? So, by the way, this is an open source project, JSON text. Maybe it's a bit small on the screen, but very useful. If you do any JSON, that's probably your go-to and you already know about it. But even JSON text, it's only one quirk for me, is that the malleables are in the same library. So I had to fork the project and basically split it. But that's the beauty of open source. It is open source, I'm allowed to do that. Now, that would break the code if I wanted to do a pull request, so I don't do a pull request, but it might be something that for a future version 2.0 might be nice, right? All right, project organization. I touched the topic when we do adapters, right? There's type coupling maybe in your code. we all code fast. We want to achieve, our target, like deliver by this date, and obviously we're going to have technical debts that is going to be accrued. That's a certainty in any from the first time that the developer started coding, that happened, and that will happen in the future. Now, I think that you should always wrap your APIs in a way that you don't make your public interface overwritable. So this started for me as a preference, and you see that on the left side, right? I've got my public method that is in white here, so it's add a value to a dictionary. This is all it is. But I've created, actually, this just calls a on add value to dictionary. And that code is empty, right? There's nothing there until you arrive at the actual implementation. Let's say it's an interface, it's a virtual class. This is completely empty. So now you're asking, why create two VIs? One is static, that calls a protected method. Well, first it's encapsulation, that's good practice. But even then, you might say, you know what? I just put it statically as dynamic dispatch, and it's fine. People can use it, that's true. Tomorrow, you're going to get a request to change, maybe add add an event. Every time that the value has changed, can you notify the framework in which this code runs that there was something that happened? Well, how do I ensure that code will always run at the same time? Well, I insert it in my public interface that is static, and I create another override if I don't want to give any specifics, or I put the event right there. And so that's what happens on the right. I have two places. I added validation of the input. Maybe that's something that you would like to have, like a validation VI that you can override, because maybe for you, having an underscore is okay, but for someone else, it's invalid character. So I don't know what you're going to do. So if you do a open source library, try to think of how people are going to use your library in the future and what are the changes. Prepare so that whatever change they do, they don't break the flow, right? A good example of breaking the flow in this case is that if you put, let's say I've got a motor and I say, move to X position, right? And now this is my interface. And below, I've got three types of motors. So I override that move to X, move to X, move to X. I've got three, Acme 1, Acme 2, Acme 3. Great. So now someone says, you know what, I'd like to have that event. Can you please fire the event when you say there's a new target? Okay, I go into my three VIs, Acme 1, 2, 3, and I add the event. Now there's a new developer in 2 years that arrives and creates Acme 4. And now suddenly he forgets to put the event. Or worse, he puts the event before calling the parent. What happens? Now your state machine might be in an inconsistent state, right? So this is the Liskov principle. Now, if you don't know Liskov, this is one of the 5 solid principles. You have the L in solid, Liskov substitution principle. I'm not here to talk to you about solid principles, but basically they're guidelines for when you develop open, object-oriented projects. So I wanted to highlight Barbara Liskov. She basically came up with what is known as the Liskov substitution principle, obviously. She's a fantastic software engineer, has been for a very long time. She did propose a concept of abstract data types that are foundational for everything that we do in object orientation, right? So she was part of those early thinkers that actually defined the future that we live in. And she's worked in distributed systems. I love distributed systems. If I'm thinking about how a system is going to be designed, I don't think that it's going to run forever on that machine. It's going to be distributed at some point in time. So at the top, right, it's if S is a subtype of T, so basically if S is a child of the class T, like everything that you can do on T can be done on S. And that's the substitution principle. All right. How are we doing on time? We've got another about 15 minutes. Your project, try to break it down. I think one of the key things about open source contributions is that if you break it down in smaller pieces, it's going to be much less work for you to maintain it. Why? Because anything that someone wants to do at a high level has implications for reuse, right? And if there's a piece of reuse that has not been extracted and put aside and used as a dependency, when there's a change that there's a bug or there's a new edge case that we figured out, like fixing it in there with unit tests that are very, very confined to what that library is doing is the key. So here, an example is my MQTT broker client connection like superstructure. It uses a lot of classes. Actually, you see a bunch of them on the right. That's a screenshot from VIPM.io, right? And everything here is related to MQTT in some way. But there are chunks of code there that can be reused in any projects. And I'm thinking about a serializer maybe, right? You have JSON, XML, flattened data, binary format, YAML, whatever. You can reuse that. So why make it a first-class citizen of MQTT broker when really, anybody can use it? Break it down. The palette that you see there is the MQTT control packets. That packet is really just an arrangement of serializer and deserialization of byte streams into MQTT fundamental packets. So if you have your own MQTT client right now that you use because it's as simple as having a TCP connection and sending the right packets, you can use just that library and forget about all the project that I've put there. Because my goal here is not to promote my project, it's to promote good reuse of components, right? So something maybe that and I would be very interested in is when we're talking about actor framework, that's awesome. This is something like this that is fundamental for LabVIEW developers to use, having a framework that is open and that they can contribute freely and propose and feel emboldened by this. But every tidbit that it uses, right, should be broken apart and made a dependency of actor framework if it's possible. And I'm saying open actor framework, but really there's a ton of reuse component that can be done like that for VI-lib. You dive into VI-lib, there are nuggets there that are absolutely powerful. We sometimes have running threads on forums that will just say, hey, did you know about this hidden gem? That was actually something that Darren Nettinger had this long blog series back in a few days back about here's a hidden gem that you didn't even know existed and that you need every day in your work. So these things should be open source in my opinion, but just advertising for preaching for the choir. All right, folder structure. So if you want to reuse, to open source a project, your reuse needs to be organized in a certain way that it won't create dependencies, right? Cross dependencies at the time. So I always put tests in my project. Well, I always, quote unquote, not always, but I like to put tests in my projects. But you can see on the right side here that my source and my tests are in different folders. And the LabVIEW project is actually outside of those. So one level down. So here I'm really at the root. What do I have? I have a project. I've got my build specs. I've got my package configuration. I've got my license and maybe a README. Well, hopefully a README, right? All right. And then everywhere else, so I've got my source and test and I've got my build packages. Now these are actually local. I'm not going to publish my build PPLs and my build packages in my source code, right? I won't commit that to Git. So I can use my git ignore to ignore those projects. I can also say when I'm in the build spec, I can say just build source, don't build test. If I put them together in the same folder, I'm going to need to create exclusions. And if you add a new test and you forget to put it at the right place, now eventually you're going to end up where you're going to build your VIPB file, your package, and it's going to bring Karaya, for example, as a dependency. I don't want you to be forced to install Karaya. Karaya just informs me that my code is fine, right? So that's my basic structure. Also, when you have your README might point to wiki or something like that on Git. Like you should maybe have a docs folder where you keep your manuals, your data sheets if you're in your project, but also your images that you reuse in your wiki. Don't put that in the source because everything that you put in source, your VI package build spec is going to point to that, and that's going to be deployed. LabVIEW version, very, very quickly, like try to use 2020 and up. I still use 2013. I don't know why. I think it's kind of I like it, but there's really no point. If you start a new project, try to think of something that will either is the earliest version that you use, right, in your work, because the first customer is you. You can think of the community, but the community benefits from your contribution, so you need to cater to your needs first. So if you use 2016, please publish in 2016, right? 2020 plus, well, that's because it's a community edition that started there. So there's definitely a good potential for contributors, right? Malleables, interfaces, TLS, all features that came up, maps maybe, right? Maps and sets. So definitely you have some constraints based on what you're actually abstracting. Use GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. They're free for individual contributors, for small companies that do really open source. Like if you don't have private stuff and and personal domains or things like that, they're free. Don't ship it as a zip file. Like that's very 2000, I think. Maybe you have a problem with reuse when you're in certain control environments, and you do need to carry it around. Do a VI package, right? If it's open source, at least, write your own stuff. You do what you want, right? You might not have the pro version to be able to build your own packages, but the community version of VIPM is free, and so you can build your packages and release them for free. So do that. The VIP file is really a zip file that is glorified and decorated with some functionality, right? Did mention open source license, like the wrong license will kill your project. If you have a unfortunately no license, well, no license is not open source. You cannot actually use the code of someone that you can look at it. I guess that was something that they forgot. You should file a bug. Ask them to put a license. This is absolutely crucial. Public domain is not equally recognized internationally. If you see public domain, you're in the US, you can use it. That's okay. That's kind of like a book after 60 years or 100 years or whatnot, right? Or Disney characters that are so old. But if you're in Europe, there might be some countries where, no, it's as if you don't have actually a license. It's not recognized. It is not a license, right? So open source initiative, you can check it. If you are publishing on VIPM.io, you need to have one of these actually recognized by open source initiative. Now, those are the ones that VIPM will give you access to right off the bat, right? But there are hundreds of different ones, some specific to domains, but these are DSD is for Berkeley, MIT, Apache, I don't remember. It's the Apache Foundation in general. And Zero BSD is not BSD. It's actually derived from something else, but they call it Zero BSD because it's a no clause BSD. That's it. That's the one that I like. Don't use copyleft licenses. Copyleft licenses are GPL. Anything that you see GPL, forget about it. People are not going to be able to package correctly. They can use your code, they cannot derive from it. If they derive from it, the problem is that they need to put it back into under the same license. So obviously if you want a company to use your code, they can use it with a copyleft license if they don't derive from it. Meaning that I bring it, I use it, it's a node, it's a method in my code, and I use it, that's perfectly fine. They can still do commercial applications and make revenue as long as they give the attribution. But a copyleft, if, for example, banana, that I'm doing a derivative of Karaya, right? If I use Karaya, if Karaya were on the copyleft, I could not do it unless I also publish on copyleft, on GPL. So be careful with those. They seem like interesting, but personal opinion, avoid them like hell. That's a copy of the previous slide. Sorry about that. I think that's about it. And I'm almost at time. Are there any questions? Final thoughts? What do you think of the NI initiative? for actor framework and icon editor. Is this something that speaks to you? I see yes. No opinion. Sergio.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned decoupling on multiple repos, right? Haven't investigated this as much as I would like, but there is a way to use all of those repos inside of another repo, and whenever you do an update, you can update those folders or other repos, right? So you can create your own versions of the repos that have decoupled folders that are individual repos, right? Like I think they're called subcomponents. I don't remember, right?
Some modules.
So, yeah. That's the thing.
Yes. Yeah, so there are advantages of submodules in the company settings, I think. When you have 100 developers maybe on a code base, you want to give them access quickly to be able to fix bugs. Let's say I've got one of my library that is a dependency of everyone, right? So they could bring the source actually on their machine and use the source directly. And that's what happens, let's say, in a Python virtual environment, right? You do your pip install, you have all the dependencies, they're local. You're not talking about the repo itself, but you have a local copy and you can go in and edit and basically go and drive into the code so that you find the bug, right? So this is how some modules could help you in a company setting. I think for open source contributions, you'd better have actually packages. You release it, and then you have them in your VIPC file.
Yes, and just one final thought, sorry.
Yeah.
Specific to Actor Framework, we have the project providers, we have the actual Actor Framework. So for me, those will be individual repos with individual pipelines, right? But I would want a repo that holds all of them, so that I can trigger my CI/CD, which will be on a different repo that will just call through GitHub Actions. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, that's the way I would like to handle the Actor Framework multiple repos, because there will be multiple BI packages, and they will be BI packages, by the way. Whenever there's a release, there's a BI package. I'm just thinking on if there's a specific order, I'd rather have them on a single Git repo that if I update and check out, I have the source there. Makes sense?
Yeah, this is something that actually there's a problem in the way that the platforms allow us to tap into those cascading CI actions. They're really downstream. So you start with your source, and then you need to actually use an API key or token or something to be able to access the other repo and have the permissions to kick off an action. Basically, let's say in your example, Actor Framework core, that's the first thing that you do. And then after it's built, you want, okay, it's successful. I've got the release. Now I need to build the Actor Framework provider that is based on that dependency. Now you would need to link from your CI pipeline in the core to be able to trigger an action on the other repo. Now that can happen across different, organizations if you want. It's just that you will need to have the permission set up with probably tokens. You cannot monitor another repo to say, for example, what would be awesome, and if it exists, please ping me about that, because I haven't found it either in GitLab or GitHub, but to say I'm monitoring Actor Framework core, and one of my triggers, Actor core does not know, but my trigger as the provider is that whenever there's a new release, I'm going to install that on my local VM, Docker, local machine, do my test to make sure that change didn't introduce anything new in mine. I'm going to run my unit test and publish myself. So that workflow to me seems more modern, where we subscribe to a change without the other one know about me, because now what we're forced to do is tight coupling. Right.
Yeah, just final thought is, I think that is some remnants of my SVN background, I think. But yeah, I agree with you. Thank you.
Thanks. And that answered your question?
Yes, it does. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Any other question? Mr. Ian?
Yes, indeed. All right. So let's say, for hypothetical reasons, that I have a project that's old. I worked on it 2-3 years ago. I got it working enough for me. And I then found some bugs and I kind of like worked on them as I found them and then ran out of time. And now it's in this state where it's, let's say I cleaned up the look and feel, I cleaned up the libraries, but I know there are bugs. I know what some of the bugs are. I don't know what some of the other bugs are. And I want to put it up in a way that's usable. Let's say I do put it up and crickets. How do I avoid crickets? Because it's going to take some time to put up. It's going to take some effort, some bandwidth that could have gone toward other things. How do I justify, make it most likely that this is actually useful? Like, does that make sense? Like I'm worried about this pain point.
Definitely, there's the cost-benefit analysis, right? If I put 5 hours, maybe that's okay. I've got my weekends. But if I have to spend 2 weeks, like, no, I'm not going to do that for maybe no one that even cares. If it's completely out of context, thing that you've done 3 years ago, maybe that's not open sourceable. Maybe it is. That's really up to you, obviously, to decide. But I would say setting up a repo is super easy. If you don't think that you're ever going to benefit financially from a piece of code that you wrote, basically, you have this idea that you've always wanted to do a startup, maybe, and this is kind of the burgeoning of it, and you don't have time right now, you've got some other priorities, like, keep it on the shelf, right? If you think that that's never going to happen, put it out there. So it takes about half an hour, and then create a few issues. You know of a bug, you create issue 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Let me end the slideshow here, and
so it is normal for a repo to start off with, these are known issues for me to get to later, or someone who's enterprising and altruistic.
So back save to 2020, right? Add a permissive license. The assert true strategy is not wired up. So I found that out yesterday, actually. So, okay, I created that, finalizing my presentation. Great. So these things, they took me less than an hour to put there. Obviously, if it's a more involved project, you might have reorganization time. Like the core, I think, to your question would be, are you familiar, enough with platforms that you are able to go on social media and promote your idea? Are you coming to user group meetings and talk about your idea? Like if you have a local user group meeting and you just go and present on something like 15 minutes, maybe you'll get, 1 or 2 people interested. You never know what happens. Like it's amazing to me how many times that I don't come to an iConnect for 3 years and I set foot and within 10 minutes someone comes and just presents and says, hey, I use your library. And I look on the stats, like it seems like no one uses it, but
that's how I found you, actually.
Absolutely. The reason why I'm on the stage is because Sergio, and I, open source guru, right, is saw me at user group meeting. I complained a bit, right, but I was talking about open source and being passionate. Yeah, exactly. So things are not perfect, but if we wait for perfection, like we've waited too long. That's something that my boss always repeats. He says, if you're not ashamed of your code when you presented the first time, you waited too long, right? We need it now, so put it out there. Put it out there. You never know, right?
Thanks. That's helpful.
Maybe
just one last thing.
One last question.
This is actually a statement. Francois, I found him because of the LabVIEW open source project. And I saw he had 46 repos, something like that. So he's a very good maintainer. So that's how I found about Francois. He really needed to be here. I really appreciate, Francois, that you came for this.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah, one last one. I think we have 3 minutes.
Okay, so GitHub, all the different languages. Is there something that I should be marking so it's easier to find by other LabVIEW people? Or is there like a environment to LabVIEW repos, or
the cool
put it on
thing,
the forums and then
that's a good point. So the cool thing is that actually, you see, it finds out that it's LabVIEW. Where is it? Yeah, LabVIEW 100%. So if you have CI/CD and you're in there, and you have PowerShell and you have C and you have whatever, right? It's going to find it out and say to people like, "There's 3% PowerShell in there."
Do people search by that?
I think in some languages maybe, but not necessarily always. Now you see a cool thing too is that I've got some contributors individually on individual projects. Sometimes someone really cares deeply about that or found a bug. Like in this case, this guy Patrick Irvin. He found a bug that's at time change. This is a library that tracks time, GPS time, Unix time, atomic clock time. Anyway, there's a bunch of really, really cool stuff here. And I thought, you know what? Leap years, but leap seconds. Have you ever heard of leap seconds before? Right? Some people in aerospace, especially, talking with satellites, they do. So yeah, he found out that on the time change, there were like some discrepancies of 1 hour sometimes when you did a certain conversion from one type to another. And so this is really something that I need a unit test for, but someone reported it. We wrote a bunch of unit tests, and now that thing is way stronger than it was.
So this is kind of to help Ian too. I think there might be two parts to your question. One is I've got something and I want to advertise. How do I get it out there? And yeah, people can search on that. You can go to get any of the Gits and say, I want to search for LabVIEW projects. If you want to advertise, a good place is putting it up on LinkedIn. There's several LabVIEW groups on LinkedIn. There's the LabVIEW Discord server. You can go start a conversation there. If the question is, how do I find stuff? You can just go Google stuff. gcentral.org is another organization I'm part of. And gcentral.org is a website that we try to publish and promote things. And so if you have a toolkit that you want to promote, we want to put it up there too, so that it's something that you can find. VIPM.io, obviously, those are for the published packages. But, we're trying to figure out better ways to bring light to the things that are just shared and open source that may not be packages yet. In fact, we got a link to Francois there. He's showing the G Central website. And that's one problem that we're still trying to solve. So if you think of a way that we can help, make a database or add to our website or whatever to help promote other LabVIEW projects, we're totally open to that.
Thank you, Q. Q controls.
The Discord server is missing for NI open source, but
Yeah, LabVIEW projects on GitHub, right? When you search trending for LabVIEW projects, there's nothing. It doesn't achieve that level, that threshold that is trending for GitHub projects. So don't even try that. But hopefully, in 5 years when we come back, maybe that's going to be different, right? It would be great to have, right now, you can do a git ignore when you create a new project, a new repo. You can actually get a git ignore that is specific for LabVIEW on GitHub. So it's cool. It means that somehow the AI figured that, this is the git ignore that everybody uses, right? And puts it out there. So we're going to get more of that. Custom actions might be for LabVIEW, right? Once we have Docker image public with LabVIEW 2025, right? So maybe now we're going to get directly, GitHub and GitLab runner actions and, directly there, specific to LabVIEW. So again, we need to get the wheel started.
2026, sorry.
2026? It's not 2025 Q3?
No, not really. There was some issues with the Docker Hub teams. We have it. It's just not published to Docker Hub. I may be getting this wrong, but R&D knows more about this and they'll say more.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your presence. Any questions?